Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Raw Reaction series. Join you at 8 a.m. every morning, keeping you up to date with all the world of Arsenal transfers. You join us for episode 199. Tomorrow, episode 200. Hopefully, we can bring some positive and good news tomorrow. But today, there's unfortunately some difficult stuff that we need to chat about. So we're going to be talking, of course, about the Raphinha situation, all the latest on that and more, plus the usual updates on the rest of Arsenal's incomings and possible outgoings. Before we go into the show any further, though, please make sure you drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are indeed new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. We've also left a poll for you guys in the chat box this morning around the Raphinha situation. We're going to talk about a lot more than just that, of course. So let's, without further ado, crack on with the show. And as always, go and tell you to subscribe to the Arsenal Way. I'll be live over there at 10 a.m. to chat more about Arsenal's transfer situation this summer, what might change and what needs to happen. So let's crack on with our first story of the day, which I'm sure all of you saw yesterday. Gabriel Jesus kicked off the day in a really positive fashion. You know, we could not have been happier with how the morning went, as images leaked by The Sun showed Gabriel Jesus, of course, arriving and meeting with Edu. He then completed his medical and all of the usual stuff that goes on around it that you've obviously seen in the Fabio Vieira behind the scenes video. And now we'll expect an announcement on this very, very soon. Hopefully very, very soon indeed. Perhaps today, perhaps tomorrow, maybe a little bit later, but there's a chance it could happen very soon indeed, which is going to be great news for Arsenal, of course, who have been trying to get this deal done for a long time. Massive coup for the club, and certainly one I look forward to seeing what Gabriel Jesus can bring ahead of next season. Now, the other big story was the Amazon All or Nothing series has released its first trailer and a release date. It will be out on the 4th of August. Now, I was hoping to do a breakdown of the series. I don't know about a watch along, as some people requested, but certainly looking into the series. But the series falls the day before I go away for my stag do. So that's going to be tricky. I didn't expect it to come out here. But it does mean that it'll all be out before my actual wedding, which means I can get all of that out of the way. It's going to release every week, 3 episodes. The episodes 1 to 3 comes out on the 4th. Episodes 4 to 6 comes out on the 11th. And episodes 7 to 9 come out on the 18th of August. I'm probably going to do a breakdown of the episodes still. It might just be a little bit delayed after the first one. We'll obviously be talking about it heavily and looking into it. It's going to be a revealing and painful experience, especially regarding the conclusion of the series. But hopefully it gives us an inside track on a lot of things that we didn't already know about the club. So we'll look forward to breaking all of that down and more very soon indeed. Now, Brooke Norton Cuffy is on his way to the England U19 Euros final. They defeated Italy 2-1. Brooke Norton Cuffy had a great game playing in that right wing back role once again. And he will now join up with the Arsenal first team after an extended holiday for pre-season. Lots to come from Brooke Norton Cuffy. Very exciting indeed. Now, Hector Bellerin and possible outgoings from the club. Atletico Madrid have entered discussions with Arsenal about a possible deal. His head is still very much with Betis, although with that deal looking unlikely due to the fact that Betis just simply cannot afford to pay what it would take to bring bring Bellerin to the club. Atletico Madrid have moved, and it seems they are now looking to try and agree a price with Arsenal, and of course get Bellerin to agree to the move as well next season. We will keep you updated on that line as it flows. Now, Lucas Torreira came out with some very interesting quotes yesterday, basically just saying there is zero chance whatsoever that he will be at Arsenal next season. He was asked basically if there's any way that he would return to Arsenal, and he turned around and said, look, he'd been told that there's no future for him at Arsenal, that, you know, he's not part of the club's plans, and he doesn't want to obviously go back. And you can completely understand why that's the case. And this isn't unusual. Clubs tell players all the time that players don't have futures with their clubs. It's a very regular thing that happens. It's not something that we need to get particularly surprised about happening. But Lucas Torreira will leave Arsenal this summer. It's been some time coming, let's be honest, that it's going to happen. We don't know where exactly he's going to go, but we do know that he is going to go this summer. Where, though, obviously we'll wait and see. But it was interesting to hear the specific quote, which was, "My desire to stay at Arsenal, ? No, from the beginning, they told me that I had no place, so my desire is not to stay either. Any team that want me has to pay my value for approximately 15 million." He didn't say whether that's euros or pounds, but 15 million euros is the asking price from Arsenal. That's clearly been made known. If anyone wants Torreira, that's the price that they've got to pay. So there you go. That's what we can expect from Lucas Torreira. Now, Lisandro Martinez, Arsenal continue to wait for a response. We talked about this yesterday, that there had not yet been a response from Ajax. Now, there was some positive feeling about this, that perhaps because they were, looking over the idea of this bid, that Arsenal may have a chance of signing him for around that 34 million euro bid that they did indeed put in, or 34 million pound bid that they did indeed put in. I think it was all, everything combined, basically. It's still a really long way off of what Ajax were asking for. I have a feeling the reason why they are mulling over this offer is they are waiting for Manchester United to come in with a rival bid for the player. He's very open to moving to the Premier League. He's open to moving to either Arsenal or Man United. Arsenal would not have made a bid if there was not an openness for the player to be open to joining Arsenal, the same as with the Raphinha situation, which we'll talk about in a second. But there is clearly an openness from the player to move to Arsenal. But I think Ajax are going to be looking to try and get maximum value for the player, which is what every club would obviously do. But Arsenal, I think, will need to move probably a lot more strictly, a lot more with intention if they want to get this deal done. They need to probably go up and blow Man United out of the water, to be honest, with a bid to get Martinez, or they will risk losing him. I think this is probably 50-50 right now regarding whether Arsenal will get Lisandro Martinez or not this summer. But Ajax don't need to cut price their deals. If Arsenal manage to get this cheaper than the asking price, that is going to be a ridiculous kind of level of bid. A ridiculous kind of achievement to get him for the level of money that they originally asked for compared to what they are asking for. I hope it happens, but we'll wait and see what happens, because it's certainly an interesting story that we will keep you up to date with. And lastly, our headline story of the day. Raphinha looks close to joining Chelsea. I just made the situation worse for you. Looks close to joining Chelsea now, much more so than Arsenal. Yesterday, Chelsea came in and agreed a fee with Leeds north of £55 million, according to David Ornstein. Fabrizio Romano said the figure is between 60 and 65, with a large portion of that being paid up front. It is a figure that Arsenal have not come close to. Arsenal had a meeting with Leeds yesterday in which they offered a verbal offer, which Leeds immediately turned down. Arsenal have not come close to supposedly agreeing a fee with Leeds. That said, there was some conflicting tweets from Fabrizio Romano that didn't really make much sense. Some of the tweets made it sound like Arsenal had agreed with the club. Others clearly made out that they hadn't. As far as I'm aware, Arsenal haven't agreed a fee with Leeds at all. Chelsea had contacted the representatives fairly early on in terms of the last few days or so. It's been very swift from Chelsea's side of things. It's a frustration. Obviously, it's a frustration that we've got this situation. I hope that this situation sorts itself out for Arsenal, but it's looking very, very difficult right now. Very, very difficult indeed. I want this to work. I want Raphinha to sign for Arsenal, don't get me wrong. But if he doesn't, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. I think Arsenal can get other players. We always talked about this deal as a luxury signing. We talked about Raphinha as a surprise deal if Arsenal were to get this done. I don't think anyone expected Arsenal to go and pay 60 million quid for Raphinha. So if it would have happened, it would have been a bonus. I want Arsenal to go out and sign a wide forward this summer. That's a position that I've been calling for the start of the window. If it was Raphinha, great. If it was one of the other targets, like a Moussa Dembele, like a Cody Gakpo, great. But Arsenal also have other priorities during this transfer window. Central midfield is still absolutely key this summer. Bringing in a player like Lisandro Martinez is absolutely key this summer. And I've said time after time that if I had to choose between Martinez and Raphinha as a priority, Martinez is absolutely the priority signing that I would prefer Arsenal to get in, because he offers Arsenal so much more coverage at centre-back, offers so much more coverage in defensive midfield, and of course in that left-back role as well. All of these positions are of a greater priority than a right wing when we've got Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli and Fabio Vieira that can all play in that right wing slot. So of all of those two players, of course, Martinez is the priority. That said, Arsenal still need to go and get themselves, in my opinion, a wide forward with the versatility to play in other areas, be it the right-hand side, be it the left-hand side, and even to cover the central position, because at the moment, our only two strikers, as we know, are Jesus and Nketiah, and then to a lesser extent, Bellerin Balogun as well. But I wanted to see us go for a wide player that had also got the capacity to play in the middle. Raphinha has only played a very, very restricted number of minutes, both on the left-hand side and in the middle. He doesn't have that versatility that other wide forwards do. So if Arsenal end up going and getting a more versatile option than Raphinha, of course, it's going to be to the benefit of Arsenal. Who that might be, it's impossible to know right now. Arsenal's kind of progress on other wide forwards is to a minimum. Now, things can change very quickly in the window, as we know, and this may change as well. And Arsenal, you may find in the next week, 2 weeks, end up switching targets to someone else. That said, Arsenal aren't completely out of the race with Raphinha yet. Chelsea are in the process of trying to persuade Raphinha to choose Chelsea. If Arsenal match the asking price of Leeds in the next, say, 24 hours, they may be able to get back into the race and get back into the fighting with a signature of Raphinha. It remains to an extent open for Arsenal to still go for Raphinha. It's not entirely over, but it certainly doesn't look anywhere near as likely as it did 24 hours ago. I also hope this is a bit of a lesson to a lot of people that believed plenty of ITK Twitter accounts. You need to make sure that you're being savvy online and with who you're believing, who you're reading into, what you're reading, and whether you believe these people. You need to be more savvy about it, because a lot of Twitter accounts have got a lot of traction off this Raphinha deal that knew nothing and tried to make a lot of educated guesses and got it wrong. That's where we need to learn some lessons on using social media in Arsenal. Anyway, that completes today's stories. We are going to go into the chat box now and answer your questions. So if you do indeed have any questions you'd like to throw into the chat box, now is your time to do so after this short break. Okay, let's go through as many of these as possible. Reese says, Tom, don't you think that Martinez is too expensive for a backup player? Yes, thankfully, he's not a backup player. He's a competitive player that will come into the squad and start plenty of games. Amira says, morning, Tom. With the club seemingly more willing to pay the asking price for Martinez and not Raphinha, does that show the position the club is prioritising, or is Raphinha just overpriced? Look, Raphinha is very expensive. I always say it's not my money. If we'd have spent the money on Raphinha, I wouldn't have really batted an eyelid at it, to be honest, unless, of course, next season he underperformed. Then we start talking about the price tag. But I think Arsenal have clearly not been willing to go to the figure that Leeds are asking for. A lot of people are going to complain about Edu, are going to complain about Arsenal not stumping up the money. Ironically, there might have been the same people that started complaining about the fact that Arsenal were looking to spend close to £70 million on Raphinha. But Arsenal aren't willing to go to that level. Arsenal have got their price. Arsenal have got their valuation of the player. And if they're not willing to go to that level, I've got to go, fair enough, respect. You don't want to go to that level on a player that you don't think is a priority during this window. Martinez is different. Martinez, I think, is a player that if we paid £42 million for, you are getting a very good player. Now, Arsenal are going to try and get the maximum value for player that they can by obviously going through this discussion process. Ajax are mulling this deal over, although I feel there is a feeling that Manchester United's interest will also help drum up a bidding war between the two teams, and Ajax are certainly waiting for that. But for me, I just think that Raphinha's price tag is the biggest stumbling block for Arsenal. Not that they couldn't afford to do it, they just don't seem to be willing to pay over a certain figure. That could change in the next 24 hours or in the next hour. It may have even already changed, and we just haven't found out the information yet. But the price tag for Raphinha, Arsenal seemingly just haven't been willing to go to that level of kind of money to pay for him. Charlie says, yeah, we had no problem overpaying for White and Ramsdale, both of which haven't retained that. Ramsdale hasn't retained his value. Charlie, I'm sorry, but you're incredibly pessimistic about things. And to say Ramsdale hasn't maintained his... If any club's coming in for Ramsdale after the season he's had, they're paying more than the 28 to 30 million pounds than we paid for him. Ben White was an investment, and we all know that about Ben White for that position. We needed a centre-back. We got a homegrown centre-back that did very well last season, that people want to bash because it's an easy stick to beat Arteta with. I'm sorry, Charlie. I disagree with your opinion wildly there. Mo says, why do we always end up in long, drawn-out transfers when other clubs get business done before a battle with other clubs? Because Arsenal obviously have a lot of principled views on the value of players, and they don't want to overpay. Now, you say that we always get drawn up, but I don't remember a drawn-out discussion for Fabio Vieira. Do you? Because I certainly don't. So, factually, saying that we always get into drawn-out discussions is not entirely true. Also, opinions about this are always based upon the media's reporting of these players and of these transfers. If interest of a player is picked up very early on, like it was with Gabriel Jesus, for instance, it was picked up way before the season had ended that Arsenal had an interest in trying to sign Jesus. And of course, that period of agreeing a fee, agreeing personal terms took time. And it was just that it was a lot done in the public eye that it was drawn out. However, for the Fabio Vieira deal, that didn't happen. However, there had still been discussions going on for some time in secret, probably for a similar length of time that we were in discussions with Gabriel Jesus. But just because the Gabriel Jesus situation was publicised, that one felt drawn out, whilst the Fabio Vieira one didn't. So your perception of Arsenal having their discussions drawn out is only going as far as, what's being reported. So the context is what's really key. Akil says, morning, Tom. Do you think we should switch our intentions back to a big number 9? No, I want to see a versatile wide player, someone who's got the capacity to play in the middle, someone that's got the capacity to play in those wide areas. I get you saying that Jesus can obviously use those, but I just don't think that there is a number 9 out there for a reasonable price besides Scamacca, who looks very close to going to PSG. And he himself indeed would be a risk. Hasn't played in the Premier League, scored 16 Serie A goals, which is, I think, his record last season. Different profile, of course, very different to the style of striker that Arsenal have been looking at. And that's why the club have had reservations about Scamacca. There are individuals within the club that, according to the Athletic, just don't have that assurance that he's the right profile of striker to go for. Beyond him, you're looking at Osimhen, that's costing you 100 million euros upwards. You're looking at Tammy Abraham, that Roma want along 80 million pounds for. Patrick Schick is off the table. Jonathan David is a possibility, but the problem with Jonathan David is that the form of the player has not necessarily put Arsenal off, but it's certainly not convinced Arsenal, quite similar to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, that they would be worth the investment that it would cost, which you're looking at upwards of 45, 50 million pounds for. It's very difficult. However, the wide forward market is very different. Cody Gakpo available for a reasonable figure. You could go for a player like Pedro Gonçalves. Arsenal are said to have an interest in Marco Asensio. I know for a fact that Mikel Arteta has admired the player for a significant period of time, but there's always been question marks about whether or not he would be a risk or too much of a risk, or whether he would fit or clash with the existing players at the club stylistically, not socially. So all of that combines to make a wide forward purchase with versatility to play in the middle, like a Gakpo, like a Pedro Gonçalves. These types of players makes it much more accessible to Arsenal to do. But Raphinha was an opportunity that they felt they could go and get, despite the fact he didn't have that versatility. Premier League ready. Arteta's trying to go down that route of bringing in players that are already kind of Premier League ready in that sense. Don't be surprised if Armando Broja comes up again as a possible target. We know that Arsenal have been tracking him for some time and monitoring that situation. So if Chelsea do indeed end up getting Raphinha and Sterling, don't be surprised if Armando Broja comes up as a possible target for Arsenal. It would be an interesting one. I'm just not sure whether he's the right profile. Again, he is more of a striker, of course, even though he can play in a wide area and has done. So let's wait and see what happens. Ian says, what about Ivan Toney? I think the attitude side of things is a problem. I don't think Arteta is a big fan of that. Neither am I, to be honest. Jesus can play on the right wing, and then Zinchenko and Martinez, I think, would be great. Would be a good window. I think for Toney, it's some of the social side of things is probably an obstacle for Arsenal and Arteta to get over. There has at no point been any kind of real suggestions that Toney is high up on Arsenal's lists at all, to be honest. Iga says, is the Champions League blow still coming back to bite us? We could have managed to stamp up the money, and do you think that we can trust Hutchinson? Same profile as Raphinha, in my opinion, only younger. Hutchinson is far and away down the pecking order from someone like Raphinha. We can't put this much pressure on our youngsters. He's not of the level required yet to compete with someone like Raphinha. He's just not at that level. He's got no Premier League experience, no senior football experience at all. He needs probably a loan before we even start considering him as a potential candidate. Regarding the Champions League from a monetary perspective, certainly, and in terms of certain players. But look, we've managed to sign Gabriel Jesus, a player that's played every year in the Champions League with Manchester City, has won, 3-4 Premier League titles with Manchester City, has never got close to win the Champions League other than that final, in the semi-finals. He's not come close to lifting it in terms of doing it. And he's sacrificing that opportunity to come to Arsenal because we've sold him the project. We've sold him the prospect of being an Arsenal player. And that shows that the Champions League is not integral to every deal, but it certainly will be having impact on some discussions, some targets, and certainly on budget. I feel like if we'd have got the Champions League, you probably may not have seen Nketiah renew, or if he still had renewed, we still may have been able to go get that third striker on top of Jesus as well. Let's go to Daniel, who says, do you think maybe the fact that Raphinha would have taken up some of Gabby's minutes next season as a part to play? No, Arsenal are very interested in Raphinha and have done, and they wanted to sign him. They just weren't willing to pay over a certain figure, and Chelsea are, unless that changes in the next 24 hours. SKCD says, I'm fine not getting Raphinha. Very good player, but would rather spend the money on a midfielder and a different wide forward like a Diaby or a Gakpo. Andreas Nielsen says, it seems Arsenal had 80 million for a winger and a midfielder, Raphinha and Tielemans. Do you think they should focus the majority of that money on a centre mid? Yes. Look, I think centre midfield is the absolute priority over a wide forward. Centre midfield has to be a priority. It's an area of the pitch that if we go into next season with the same three players, we've not progressed. If we go into next season with Partey, Xhaka and Ødegaard as our three midfielders, despite Partey being great and Ødegaard being great and Xhaka having his, he's a decent footballer. If we don't go in with an upgrade, it will be a problem. If it was me, and I've said this time after time, I'd go into Lazio and say, here's £55 million for Milinkovic-Savic. Give him. Just give me him. That's all I'm asking for. Just give me Milinkovic-Savic. That's what I would go and do. I'd rather spend 55 million on Milinkovic-Savic than 55 million on Raphinha any day of the week. Any day of the week. I'd rather see that as a priority. I just don't think that's going to happen. Calvin says, will Xhaka still be a mainstay in our midfield next season? Depends if we sign a player. Even if we sign someone, Xhaka is trusted. Xhaka is very well trusted by the manager. He will still play plenty of football unless he is ousted from that position. NVR says, Tom, who's the last attacking player who came straight from the Dutch league and did good, not on the Gakpo hype train? So what, to the Premier League? It's a good question because obviously Memphis Depay didn't do that great. Steven Bergwijn started off well for Spurs and then trailed off, unfortunately. Luis Suarez, you would probably look to, obviously came from Ajax and did brilliantly for Liverpool. Thinking off the top of my head of anyone else that's come in recently from the Dutch league, and it's tough. But you go top of the end, Luis Suarez, and then you're kind of going down to Depay Steven Bergwijn that weren't as good as that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're coming from that league that you won't succeed. Wijnaldum, it obviously came to Newcastle first and then Liverpool. But yeah, Christian Eriksen is a good shout. Came from Ajax, went to Spurs, did very, very well indeed. Let's go to Jason says, Tom, you smash it, mate. So proud to be a part of TGT Chat. I'm proud that you're part of it, Jason. Thank you. If this blows up like Arsenal could this season, you've made it. Keep it up. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate the kind words. James says, people kicking off about Raphinha, but I'd rather spend 55 million on Tielemans and Zinchenko. Double deal. I don't think anyone should kick off about Raphinha. I mean, if you're criticising their due for not stumping up the money, I'm not sure why. I'll criticise at the end of the summer if we've not, brought in the necessary players. But if we're not willing to go to a certain level for a player that they don't think is worth that amount of money, I'm not going to necessarily be critical, especially when it's a player that's not a priority over a Lisandro Martinez or a central midfielder. If we don't get those players, that's when I'll start being critical. But I'm not going to be sitting here on the 29th of June before we've even played our first pre-season game and start criticising what we're doing. It just doesn't make any sense to me to do that because the money for Raphinha is of a really high level. I've said time after time that, it's not my money. If we get him, great. If we don't, I just hope we get a player or players that can obviously give us what we need. Dunko says, I'll spend 65 million on Sergei Milinkovic-Savic too. I don't blame you because I'll do the same thing. Hamza says, do you still feel confident about next season if the main business we end up doing is Jesus, Vieira and Tielemans? Look, we needed a striker. We get one. We needed a centre mid. We get one. Vieira, seems like a bit of a bonus signing, but we need more. I wouldn't be confident with just those three. We need more. We need a Martinez. We need a wide forward, in my opinion. So I think we need two more on top of that to make it a good, very good window this summer. Let's have a quick check on the poll that we put into the chat box at the start of today's show. The question was, are you confident Arsenal will secure a solid alternative to Raphinha if they miss out on him? Nearly 1,000 of you have voted. I think, actually, maybe we're close to hitting that 1,000. If you haven't already voted on the poll in the live chat box, make sure you do. And after you voted on that poll, your next job is to hit the like button. Make sure you do that. There's 1,500 of you watching. Please do show your support to the channel. We're doing these every day. Tomorrow will be our 200th episode of the Arsenal transfer show. So do make sure you are showing your support. It really does help out the channel, spreads it further, gets more people interested and watching, and makes it more interactive for us. But nearly 1,000 of you have voted now on that poll. 56% of you say yes, you are confident, but 44% of you that have voted so far says no. It's very split. And I'm not blaming you for that. I can't blame you for having the apprehension, I suppose is the right word, around not getting this done. Tis a Discuss says, if Arsenal fails to sign Martinez/Tielemans after we seem to miss out on Raphinha, it would be typical Arsenal, losing all the momentum and faith our fan base has built up to this point. It's crunch time. Arsenal are resting a lot of hope on this window. If Arsenal fail this window, it will be awful to start the season without those primaries. Jesus, great. Vieira, great. Turner, great. Marquinhos, great. But we need to make sure that we get a central midfielder, a wide forward, and that versatile defender. They are three key areas of the summer transfer window that I want to see Arsenal go in for this summer. Ahmed says, any chance of going back for Gnabry? The go back question is strange. We've never really had an interest in Gnabry. Arsenal have never really tried to push for him this summer. Sure, they might monitor the situation. They might be aware of Bayern's issues. But the wages that Gnabry wants, the way in which you'd have to convince him to drop down to the Europa League just makes that deal near impossible, in my opinion. I don't think it's realistic. So please don't get your hopes up about Gnabry coming to Arsenal. It just isn't a realistic situation. Let's go to Jam, who says, and thank you for the donation, who would be your number one midfield target to prevent last season's issues? Milinkovic-Savic, I've said this time after time, can do the job going forwards, can do the job going backwards. Perfect central midfield option for me. Perfect central midfield option for me. Marcus says, does Raphinha feel like Vlahovic? No, there's a difference between the two. The difference between Vlahovic and Raphinha is that Raphinha there was an openness to come to Arsenal. There was an openness. If Arsenal had agreed a fee with Leeds, then they may have been able to convince Raphinha to join. Arsenal don't bid for players unless they have kind of an encouragement that the player would be open and willing to come to Arsenal. Vlahovic never showed that willingness to come to Arsenal, hence why Arsenal never bid for Vlahovic. And that's the difference between the two situations. Langer says, Tom, who would you bring in to add goals, or would you rather more steel in the midfield? Midfield, as I said, I think is more important than the wide forward position, but we need both. We need to make sure that we get both. Lynn says, yes, Tom, Jesus will be great if he has a good link up, but getting him could be a disaster if he hasn't got that support. Thankfully, he does have support existing at Arsenal in the form of Saka and now Vieira and Ødegaard and Smith Rowe and Martinelli. He's got a lot of players and creative players with that around him. But we do need to bring in a wide forward, and we do need to bring in a progressive central midfielder to take the ball more successfully from our half to the opposition's and into the opposition box. That's what we need. If we don't go and get that this summer, that's a big, big problem. Stefan says, people are complaining we didn't get Raphinha, but the same people would have complained about the fee. There is obviously going to be some hypocrisy out there. Don't get it twisted. You're going to see hypocrisy over the next week. It's going to happen. But at the same time, for me, if Arsenal are not overpaying and are being conservative about their kind of plans this summer and get the business done, I don't have any complaints. But we need to get the business done. And the key thing was trying to get it done before the start of the season. Really, before the US tour, for me, was a big deadline. Thankfully, we've got players in, so I'm not going to be wildly frustrated if we've not yet got the centre mid and wide forward and versatile defender in by the first game of pre-season, because we've got Vieira and Turner and Marquinhos and Jesus all done. But I want to see more done before the start of the season. There's time. There's loads of time. We've got over a month before the start of the season. Let's get those players in. Let's get them in before. And we need to be quick. We need to move, and we need to move from one target to another if we aren't going for Raphinha. If we can't match that price, let Chelsea do their thing, move on to the next one. Billy says, is there any chance Fabio Vieira fills the right wing gap now? Yes, there is. He has played there a number of times. He could technically play on the right-hand side. But we all know that Saka's starting at the right wing against Crystal Palace. I don't think there's any kind of, there's no question that Saka starts right wing that first game of the season. So even if we assign Raphinha, does he start? The answer is no. Saka was always going to start there. It might have been that we gradually developed a front three where Raphinha goes right, Saka goes left. But the start of next season, I never saw anything other than Saka starting on the right-hand side. I never saw anything. Jesus in the middle, Saka on the right, probably Martinelli on the left-hand side. That's probably what was going to happen. So let's see what happens. Abe says, thoughts on Domenico Berardi as an alternative to Raphinha? He's quite underrated and definitely cheaper and got 15 goals. Yeah, his age, I think, is a bit of a problem. It's 27, turns 28 in August. If you invest in Berardi and it's going to cost you big money, you're looking at 40 million plus, I think. You're investing money that you're never going to get back. Raphinha, a 25-year-old, you probably could make back your money in 3-4 years, or you renew their contract and you've got a long-term investment on that amount of money. But a 28-year-old come the start of the season, I'm not sure that's wise to go big, especially during this period of Arsenal's finances. I want to see mid-20s players that have sell-on value, but also have immediate impact. And Jesus is the perfect example of a player that can do that. Jesus will retain and probably improve on his value whilst at Arsenal, we hope, if he performs. And Raphinha probably would have done the same. But I'm not sure Berardi is of the right profile for us to go for and spend that kind of money. Billy Boy says, Tom, what are your thoughts on João Palhinha? Looks like Fulham want him, but I think he's a quality backup for Partey. Yeah, playing in that defensive midfield position for Sporting, Palhinha's done very well, forced his way into the Portuguese national side as well. Doesn't seem to be too expensive either. Could be a good backup option. However, if we're signing Lisandro Martinez, I don't think a defensive midfielder is the right kind of central midfield signing. If we're getting Martinez, that should cover enough of the position for me that we don't need to go for an Yves Bissouma-esque signing in the summer. Release the Peace says we definitely need another player who can cover all three of those front three positions, similarly to Jesus or Jota, but ideally taller. Gakpo may be an option, but ideally someone with a more proven track record. You know, I feel like if Arsenal go for Gakpo, they could definitely hijack that Leeds deal. Ironically, you know, Leeds going for the player to replace Raphinha. Arsenal could end up going in to try and get him as well. Sandile says, Tom, do you believe we will sign a centre mid? Yes, I do believe that we will sign one. There's a long, long time left in the window, and Arsenal know that's a position that they wanted to invest in. So, yes, I am still confident. Anurban says, Man United and Chelsea have started storming the market. Do you think Arsenal's efforts will peter out? No, Arsenal will continue to try and sign the players that they need to sign. Just because other teams come into the mix doesn't mean that you suddenly just stop searching for your targets. Arsenal will continue to push and try to sign the players that they need to sign. I wouldn't necessarily I think you need to be worried about Arsenal not trying to get the targets. Machego says, Tom, do you see us going for Seko Fofana and Tielemans as two midfielders? Fofana's had a fantastic season for Lens. We all know that. PSG are said to be the favourites in signing him. Unsurprising, one of the best players in Liga last season, going to the best team in Liga. No surprise there, especially with Christophe Galtier moving. But I don't think we'd sign both of them. I think it would be one or the other, not both of them in the summer. Morning, John T. Do you think Ajax is stalling for United? Yes, I do. I think that Ajax are stalling to see if Manchester United beat Arsenal's bid for Martinez. That's why they're not rejecting it outright as of yet. They'll mull it over. Arsenal will need to demand an answer fairly swiftly. They need to make sure this deal happens. Look, for me, Martinez is such a key signing. If Arsenal can do it, it would be a great addition to the squad. I hope that we can do it next season. Mohammed says, how is signing a 27/28-year-old a bad idea? Someone of that age takes pressure off our youngsters and gives them time to develop. Ideally, they would make an immediate impact. It depends on the price. If you're telling me that you can sign a 28-year-old that provides you an instant impact for around the £25 million figure, around that, I'm not going to have too much of an issue, because I think if it's an investment on that kind of age bracket, it's not too bad. If you're telling me that you're going to go out and spend 50 million plus on a 28-year-old that plays in a position that we've already got Bukayo Saka in, I'm not sure that's smart. I'm not sure that's the right way for Arsenal to move. I just don't think it's a good idea. Al says we should go back in for Porto and Vitinha. I thought Vitinha was looking like he was going to PSG, unless that's changed. But Vitinha is a very, very good player indeed. Assar, we are not linked with Willian again. Don't believe everything you read. Hector says we'll have to eventually choose between Saliba, Gabriel, and White, and if so, who? Well, Gabriel and White starts the season. We have no reason to drop either of them. Saliba will fight for his place and hopefully get into the team. He'll get a chance in the Cup and in the Europa League, and of course off the bench in the Premier League. And if one of those two gets injured, he's the first pick that comes in. I look forward to seeing what Saliba brings next season. I want him to succeed, but you don't just get given a place in the Arsenal team. You earn it, and he has to earn it, and he has to come back and fight for that place. Telvin says, Dear Tom, do you really think Arteta will be spoiled for choice if they manage to sign Raphinha? I mean, yeah, if they sign him, you're a bit spoiled for choice. Saka, Raphinha, Martinelli, Smith Rowe, Fabio Vieira. You know, I've got loads of players that Jesus can even play in a wide role. And Nketiah has played in a wide role. So, yeah, I'd say that's sport for choice. But it's about how you... And Pepe's still here, of course. At the moment, it depends on what happens with all the options that we've got. Marcus says, name one player you have not mentioned that could join us. Wow. That's a tough question, because obviously all the players we get linked to, we talk about. So players we're not linked to that could join Arsenal is going to take a fair deal of thinking, Marcus, and not off the top of my head. Wide players that we've been linked to, or rather we've not been linked to, that have had good seasons. Oh, I'm wrapping my brains now. But nothing's really coming forward, to be fair. I'm thinking La Liga because that's the one I watch the most of. But still, even then, I don't think... I hope you're not hearing that drilling outside. Yeah, off the top of my head, Trossard we've been linked to. Szoboszlai. Yeah, Szoboszlai, no, I don't see that happening. Obviously, I would love to see Szoboszlai Arsenal just for the memes, but yeah, I don't see that happening. Dybala has been linked to Arsenal as well. Savic is 27, says Duke, all right. I think there's a difference. This is the exception. This is the exception. Domenico Berardi, not world class. Very good player. Very good player, very akin to Serie A and, what he does at Sassuolo. Milinkovic-Savic is world class, and that's the exception. The exception to the rule about signing a 27 or a 28-year-old for a big fee is if they are a world class player. And Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, as I've said before, and people in the chat box know this already that have been watching the show time after time, but the only exception to the age rule is if a player is world class. And Sergei Milinkovic-Savic is world class. John says you haven't mentioned Charles de Ketelaere, of course, of Club Bruges. Looks like he might be going to Leeds. Possibly. Maybe we try and hijack that. He's very different profile. Very, very different profile. Carl says the Watford bloke, who I assume he means is Ismail Assar. Maybe he's the type of guy that we go for instead. Someone suggested Terrier. Massibulele says Terrier, of course. I want to say at Rennes. I think Martin Terrier is at Rennes. He had a very, very good season last year. Let's have a quick check on those stats. Martin Terrier. He does indeed play for Rennes. Knowledge. Someone who doesn't play FIFA, trying to keep up with players. 20 goals, 4 assists in Liga, 7 assists in total in 44 games is very good. Very good indeed. He is 25, a good age to go and sign someone. Fabian Ruiz, of course, Temba, we've been linked with him. Dan Juma, we talked about him in our tier list video. Could he be someone we end up going for? He's stepped up his career massively since going to Villarreal. There's been loads. Bizarre says, do you think Mikas Pepele is leaving for sure? He changed his agent with the idea to leave. So not leaving would be a big failure on the agent's part, I think. Neto says Nsova. Neto, of course, at Wolves, Portuguese international winger, has faced a serious injury problem. Is that a risk? I think it might be too much of a risk for Arsenal to go in for. Anyway, we've been going well over time today, but thank you to the over 1,500 of you that have been tuning in live. We do these every morning for those of you that are new to the channel today, 8 a.m. UK time. I'll be back this afternoon at 6 p.m. for another conversation with you all. Looking forward to that as always. Genuine pleasure. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you're not done with this ugly mug of a face, I'll be live at 10 a.m. over on the Arsenal Way as well. Link in the description as always. See you soon, guys. Have a fantastic Wednesday. And as always, up the Arsenal.